Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3 from the class Introduction to History and Civilization are going to present about Roman buildings and architecture. We have 4 presenters from our group. From the left, you can see Faridah Nuha, and then Nurin Adani, Nurul Sahira, and Nur Akila. Our presentation are going to be started with the explanation about the ancient Rome and then the introduction towards the Roman architecture and continue with the construction method and its characteristics, and then the building typologies of the Roman and the ancient Rome, and then last but not least, the impacts of Roman architecture towards the modern time.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Faridah Nuha and I am the first presenter for this presentation. Before we go through about the Roman building and architecture, I will first present briefly about the ancient Rome. So ancient Rome was found in 753 before Common Era, and Rome is located in the Italian peninsula. As being shown at the map, the Italian peninsula is a part of continent of Europe, and the Italian peninsula sticks out into the Mediterranean Sea. And once the Romans controlled the Italian peninsula, they conquered islands and coastal areas around the Mediterranean. And after a while, the Romans controlled the whole Mediterranean region. And after that, they called the Mediterranean as our sea. Next, there is a mythical folktale about the existence of Rome. It was told by Roman legend that there are twin boys named Romulus and Remus, and who were raised by a wolf. And the story says that the boys grew up and built a city on the banks of the Tiber, where the Rome was begin. And the brothers fought, and at the end, Remus was killed by Romulus, who next became a king. The new city was named Rome after him, but that is just a mythical stories and not true stories. So what's the true stories of the existence of the Rome? The Rome probably began when some farmers and shepherds built a village of small huts in one of the 7 hills near the Tiber River, as shown as the picture at the slide. These people probably settled by the Tiber because it was a good place to live. The soil was rich, there was plenty of water, and the river was good for travel. An island in the river near the village made crossing the river easier. As the next picture shows the hills at the Tiber River, the 7 hills around the Tiber made it hard for enemies to attack, and Rome grew as more people settled on those hills. This is why Rome also become known as the City of 7 Hills. And the 7 hills of Rome is Esquiline Hill, Palatine Hill, Aventine Hill, Capitoline Hill, Quirinal Hill, Viminal Hill, and Caelian Hill. Next, before we continue on the building and architecture of the Rome ancient, let's take note about how were the Romans. So the Romans were best in warfare, engineering, and setting up a government. They are practitioners and builders that learning from the genius of the Greek, but not as religious as the Greeks. They are more recreational buildings than sacred, and they developed a driving compulsion to spread the benefits of Roman law, and had a deep intolerance for people who were not Romanized. And last but not least, the main point of our presentation, let's see that Roman introduced a new building types and construction systems and materials, developed architectural forms on a grand. Now let's take a look about on the social class of the Roman. So the main division of the social class got 2, the patricians and the plebeians. First, the patricians. The patricians is the upper class at that time, and only a few Roman families were patricians. These families were very powerful. They are the rich aristocrats, the membership of the Senate, political debates, they carry out religious ceremonies, and were also control the government and the army. And the second one are the plebeians. The plebeians usually are the ordinary Roman citizens. They are mostly the poor working men and women. They are the commoners, taxpayers, poor farmers, and slaves. At the early in the Republic, the patricians had almost all the power. They guarded their power and gave very little to the plebeians. The plebeians, the one that the ordinary citizens only could make some laws in their assembly, but the patrician senate controlled the government. The senate decided how government money was spent, and it also decided who worked for the government and when Roman would make war and peace. And as to be mentioned, the Romans introduced new building types and construction system and materials, developed architectural forms on the grand scale. By that, let's go further towards what have they contributed to Roman building and architecture.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurin Adani, metric number 1814598. I will be presenting the introduction of Roman architecture. Roman architecture continued the legacy left by Greek architects, and they established architectural orders, especially the Corinthian. The Romans were also innovators, and they combined new construction techniques and materials with creative design to produce a whole range of brand new architectural structures. Typical innovative Roman buildings include the Basilica, Triumphal Arch, Monumental Aqueduct, amphitheatre, and residential housing block. Roman architecture is essentially a hybrid composed of elements inherited from the Etruscans combined with the outside influence of the Greeks. As an example, the native Etruscan building traditions can be recognized in the early substructures of the Capitoline Temple in Rome. Um, with archaeological evidence of this kind supplemented by ancient descriptions, this temple can be identified as the type described by Vitruvius as typically Etruscan, consisting basically of a wide structure with a deep porch supported by columns. Okay, now I will continue to present the construction methods and characteristics. Romans were famous for their advancement in architecture and engineering. Aesthetically, the Romans were content to follow Greek precedents, but structurally, they improved on them. Here I attach the picture of new construction methods. The first one is Roman arc, and the second picture is vault, and the last one is dome. With these methods, the Romans were able to construct bigger temples and buildings than ever before. Adoption of imposing building scale and size to reflect the grandeur of the empire. Greek shapes assimilation, which architectonical orders were used more in a decorative than in a practical way. The use of orders linked to the wall created a decorative element. They also used the classical orders, and two more, which are Tuscan and Composite. Okay, here are the example of the Composite order and the Tuscan order. Introduction of concrete in construction, a stronger and readily available substitute for stone, which allows for more dramatic forms. Freedom of concrete also inspired the colonnade screen, which a row of purely decorative columns in front of a load-bearing wall. Tile or mosaic-covered concrete supplanted marble as the primary building material. In small-scale architecture, concrete strength uh, freed the floor plan from rectangular cells. Use of the arc, vault, apse and dome, all of which can be used to span spaces for public buildings designed to accommodate a large crowd.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Sahira binti Muhammad Azhari, and I will present about the building typologies in ancient Roman. It is divided into three aspects, which are infrastructure, residential, and recreational. Under infrastructure, I will present about the bridges and aqueduct. Under the residential aspect, I will present about insulae, domus, and the villa. And under the recreational aspect, I will present about bath, theatre, amphitheatre, circus, and stadium. So one of the infrastructure in during ancient Romans time is bridges. Bridges for roads were spectacular and significant construction works and had their place both in the landscape and in the city. Many bridges constructed during the empire are still in use today. The bridge's contribution to the idea of empire was significant. Transportation was an essential element of commerce and military needs. The ability to move armies and products across rivers was critical to the expansion of the empire. The earliest bridges were constructed of wood but are only confirmed by pictorial representation on Trajan's column and on a mosaic in Ostia. Several stone bridges are still in existence, so it is still possible to observe the method of construction. The most difficult task in bridge construction was the foundation and the piers. In areas where there were dry seasons, the foundation and piers could be constructed during this time. In areas where water flowed continuously, cofferdams were used. Pozzolana cement was critical to the construction of bridge piers with its ability to set underwater. In order to reduce the impact of constantly flowing water and potential damage caused by flooding, the number of piers was kept at a minimum and arches were constructed as large as possible. Cutwaters were placed ahead of the bridge piers to deflect tree trunks and debris that might be carried during a flood. Not all bridges were constructed to cross water. Some were built to cross valleys and other uneven land areas. Setbacks in some aqueducts were also used as bridges. Viaducts, bridges over land, were constructed using multiple arches because the catastrophic flood threat was not as great as for the river or water crossing. Bridges also often had a monumental nature due to their placement at city entrances and along points of passage, and they were often accompanied by triumphal arches. An essential activity of the empire was transportation, and the bridge provided a critical component of this activity. The arch, again, provided a critical construction and architectural element in the design and construction of bridges. Roman capacity to speed the movement of armies and delivery of products, due in part to the bridge, served the empire as a vital resource. Other infrastructure during ancient Roman times is aqueducts. Roman aqueducts have been the subject of much study and are familiar even to the casual observer. An adequate water supply was of primary importance to the Romans. Vitruvius devoted Book 8 of the 10 books of architecture to water. He began by instructing on how to find water by obtaining water from rain, rivers, and springs. He then explained the various methods of testing to determine if the water is of a suitable quality. There are principles for this aqueduct, which is for channels, the masonry should be as solid as possible, and the floor of the watercourse should have a slope calculated to be no less than half a foot every 100 feet. The masonry should be vaulted so that the sun touches the water as little as possible. The, the feature that gives the Roman aqueduct its visual identity is the arch. The Romans' use of repeated arches, essentially a modular system of construction, allowed them to build an aqueduct of indefinite length, and this is what they basically did with the spans across the plains. Concrete, stone, and brick, along with an ample supply of labor enable the expansion of this water delivery system. But it is the arc that is the trademark architectural feature that allows the aqueduct to be the most powerful expression of an empire produced by the Romans. The arc, with its ability to sustain loads in far greater amounts than post and lintel construction, allowed the aqueducts to serve as bridges at some river crossings. This, however, is a secondary consideration. The visual impact of thousands of arches supporting the remains of aqueducts endures today. Aqueducts delivered to Rome the essence of life, and to do this consistently and reliably demonstrated the absolute power and the advantages of the empire. One of the residentia during ancient Roman times is insulae. The name of the insulae was derived from the Latin for islands. It is a block with shops and light industry at the ground level, and apartments is above, and it is arranged in height from 4 to 7 stories. The other residential during ancient Roman times is domus. We can see here in this picture that high outer walls with no windows, the garden also there, and penitite roofs. There is upper floor bedrooms overlooking garden. There is also rainwater pool, a study with no glass windows, bakery, dining room, kitchen, and shops are renting ground floor rooms on main. So, a well-appointed domus should include glass windows, but these are very expensive. Less well-off hence would use animal skins stretched across the openings. The other residential during ancient Roman times is the villa. The villa is a large residence for the wealthy and those in power, and the walls of the villa are adorned with frescoes and extensive mosaic murals depicting their lavish lifestyles. So, one of the recreational during ancient times, is bath. Vitruvius recommended the site for construction of baths to be as warm as possible, facing away from north and northwest winds, so that the caldera, which is a hot room, and tepidaria, which is warm room, will have light from the west in winter. He instructed that care should be taken that men's and women's caldera be connected and in the same area so a common furnace can be shared. A special feature of Roman bath construction was the suspended floor, which allowed heat to be circulated underneath to regulate the temperature of the floor. The introduction of this feature coincides with the introduction of window glass, which occurred sometimes in the late 1st century after this descended. The baths constructed prior to this were built with very small windows, causing the interior of the bath to be quite dark. So, Vitruvius also provided the following instructions for the construction of the suspended floor, which is first, the floor is laid with 1.5 foot tiles that incline toward the furnace, so that if a ball is thrown in, it cannot stay in place but returns to the furnace on its own accord. In this way, flame will circulate more easily under the suspended floor. On top of these piers of 8-inch tiles should be placed so that 2-foot tiles can be placed over them. The piers should be 2 feet high, and they should be mortared with clay mixed in with hair, and over them placed 2-foot tiles which will hold up the pavement. Vitruvius' instructions provided an insight into the complex construction techniques applied by the Romans. There does, however, seem to be a discrepancy. Hence, Roman baths display the customs and style of living of a pleasure-loving people. They were not only built for luxurious bathing, but were a place for social life, news, gossip, lectures, and games, such as board games, exercise, and games with balls. The baths were an integral part of Roman life. Traditionally, there was a small charge to enter the baths, but some emperors opened them to the public free of charge. Baths were arranged with a central hall with the Caldaria room, Tepidaria room, and Frigidarium attached. Several other services were available at baths, ranging from barbers, manicurists, shampooers, and oil anointers. There was usually an open garden adjoining the bath and a running track and seats for spectators. Other adjoining structures contained lecture rooms, shops, and housing for the many slaves who staffed the bath. The city contained most of the baths, but baths were also constructed in Pompeii, North Africa, Germany, and England. Baths were exported to the far reaches of the empire, and as a result, their luxury was exposed to all the empire. This would generate pleasure and enjoyment for the citizens who could participate and envy for those who could not. The baths of the empire were a luxury, a threat of a pleasure-loving populace. The origin of this need for pleasure was human nature, but what provided it was the empire. The wealth, innovation, and stability of the empire allowed for this unique experience to be created. Other recreational during ancient Roman times is theaters. Similar in nature to bath, theaters were a means of entertainment rather than pleasure, but were also luxury experienced by the Romans because of the empire. With basins provided, the populace was allowed to turn its attention to non-essential activities. The theater was one of several entertainment facilities produced by the Romans in addition to the amphitheater and the circus. The theatre should be built in the forum, which is understandable as this was the primary center of activity. Roman theatres were adopted from the Greeks and were limited to a semicircle. They were usually on the side of a hill to allow the step seating to be arranged and constructed with some ease. Where an appropriate hillside was not available, the theatre was constructed using concrete vaulting supporting the tiers of seats. In the case of vaulted construction, a shelter for inclement weather was a bonus. Hence, theatres were constructed throughout the empire, providing opportunities for entertainment for citizens. Entertainment would not have been contemplated nor possible had it not been for the power of the empire. The other entertainment venue for the Romans was the amphitheater. The modern interpretation of the amphitheater a semicircular outdoor facility, was known to the Romans as the theater just described. The Roman amphitheater was what we now refer to as a stadium or arena. The amphitheater was a uniquely Roman invention for which they apparently did not rely upon Greek influence or design. Elliptical in shape, the amphitheater was built with rising tiers of seats, making a continuous auditorium around a central arena. Amphitheaters were found in every important settlement of the empire and were a part of Roman life. The most famous of all Roman amphitheaters and possibly of all Roman buildings is the Colosseum Rome. The Colosseum was constructed in a level valley between the Esquiline and Cælian hills. The outer walls of the ellipse have a measurement. A podium at the floor level provided seats for the emperor, senators, and other officials of state. Rising behind and around the podium were seats for 50,000 spectators. Below the seats were corridors and stairs for attaining the upper tiers. Outside are pins for securing ropes when occasion required a large fabric canopy be deployed to shade the spectators. Construction of the Colosseum employed most all of the structural building materials available to the empire. The foundation was concrete and the supporting walls were constructed of tufa stone and brick. Travertine blocks secured together with metal clamps comprised the facade and marble was used for the seats and ornaments. The structural design of the building with wedge-shaped piers radiating inward supporting concrete vaults produced an exceedingly strong structure which has stood for almost 2 millennia. If not for scavenging for materials for other later structures, the Colosseum will appear today much as it did in the 2nd century. The exterior of the Colosseum is 4 stories tall. The first 3 floors of arches, which is a simple yet complex use of this architectural element that produces a magnificent appearance that remains impressive even when compared to modern structures. Even though the amphitheater was original to the Romans, it employed many classical elements of architecture. The amphitheater's purpose was purely to provide entertainment, albeit there was a certain amount of related economic activity, like the theater. The ability of this type of facility to exist was a result of the empire reflecting Rome's economic stability, military power, wealth, and capacity for innovation. Circuses also the recreational building typologies during ancient Roman activities. The Roman circus was built to accommodate horse and chariot racing, and those built were grand and magnificent structures exceeding the grandeur of the amphitheater. Due to its imposing size, one lane of the Circus Maximus reached almost half a mile. Chariot racing was very popular in Rome, and much money was spent on horses and riders. Charioteers were the equivalent of modern celebrities, and they were paid handsomely, and as in modern times, betting produced even more interest. The design of the circus was simple as banks of seats around the track were constructed by use of bolted concrete necessary due to the level side. The circus maximum room was the largest of the circuses and measured 2,000 feet in length, 650 feet in width, and is estimated to have seated 250,000 spectators. A long straight line on each side of a divider called a spina provided the racing circuit. Like this Colosseum, the Circus Maximus exterior was adorned with hundreds of arches. So, as a summary, the Roman culture provided its citizens with remarkable experiences in social gathering and entertainment, and at the same time expressed the strength, vitality, and authority of the Roman Empire.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nur Akila binti Sahar. I will continue with the remaining types of building in ancient Rome. There are 3 other types of building which can be categorized as art, public, and religious. Today I will focus on the public type of building, forum, and basilica, as well as religious type of building, which is temple. Firstly, the public building, forum. Forum was a central open space for meeting, market, and gathering for political discussion or demonstration. It is a central city location that is used for communicating ideas and news. So it was comprised of several public buildings, which include markets, courts, jails, and government facilities. Forum was also built by the emperors as monuments to themselves, not for additional civic space. So one of the example for the forum is the Trajan's Forum. It was the largest of the forums in Rome, and it consists of shops, marketing area containing more shops, basilica, 2 libraries, and Temple of Trajan. Next public building is Basilica. Basilica was a large rectangular hall. Basilica was the hall of justice and commercial marketplaces, and it was an important place in Rome. So this is one of the most important example of basilica, which is Basilica of Trajan. So it was attached to and entered from Trajan's Forum and was adjoined by Greek and Latin libraries. The internal height was 120 feet and the roof was timber truss, which is a typical construction for basilicas. Basilica was flanked by aisles with galleries above it. So for law purposes, The court officials sat upon a raised dais in a semicircular apse, which is a circular extension of the rectangular hall. The roof of the basilica, as mentioned, was truss instead of dome. Basilica expressed an empire in a way similar to the Forum. As a commercial center, it has enabled and assisted the Roman economy, and as a legal center, as the court, it has allowed the enforcement and application of law and encouraged a civil society. Religious building in Rome, the temple. The temple was a place for personal vows, ritual ceremonies, advertising state acts, deeds, and documents. It was a place to inform the public on what was going on in the government, the military, and other official organizations. So it was a symbol of authority for the empire. Roman temples were rectangular and circular. So the rectangular temples were built in the style of the Greeks with a podium and portico. However, the Greek temples is longer than the Roman, which means the Roman temples is shorter in proportion than the Greek temple. Another thing that differentiates the Roman temples with the Etruscan and Greek is that the temple in Rome, they were set to face their own associated forums, with the emphasis on the steps and portico, while the Greek temples were usually faced to the east and Etruscan temples were usually to the south. This is one of the example for the Rome temple, which is the Temple of Fortuna Virilis, which located in front or set facing the Forum of Boarium. Pantheon is an example of circular temple in Rome. So Pantheon employs the use of the dome, another of Rome's significant architectural features. It was built in two different periods. The first one as an open space by Agrippa, which is the son-in-law of Augustus, and was completed in 25 BC. And the famous rotunda was then added by Hadrian between the AD 118 and 125. The Pantheon's foundation is 14 feet 9 inches deep, and the walls below the dome are constructed of brick-faced concrete. Lighting for the interior is provided by a single unglazed opening in the crown of the dome. The temples of Rome has provided especially a powerful expression of empire. The temples were monuments to religious gods as well as the monuments to the emperors themselves, who each desired his own temple. Temples were the place for communication and also a place for the recording of public events in Rome.
Last but not least, I will continue to conclude the presentation with the sharing on how Roman building and architecture impact towards modern times, focusing on the modern architecture and civilization. So the first one, the Romans constructed monuments to demonstrate their power. Any great works of Roman architecture were built to demonstrate the Romans' power, as emperors celebrated their status and reputations with grand public works of architecture. And is, for example, the Ark of Constantine. It's built to commemorate the Battle of Milvian Bridge. It is one of the largest surviving structures from that period, and it was the inspiration for London's famous Marble Arch, which stands 21 meters tall. And the next one, the second one, the Pantheon, is a magnificent piece of Roman architecture. Despite advances in technology, science, materials, and architecture, the Pantheon dome in Rome remains the world's largest unsupported concrete dome. This is nearly 2,000 years old structure built during the reign of Augustus. It beats anything that built today. And the third impact is the use of arches and vaults in architecture was developed by Roman architecture. While Roman architecture did not invent the arch or the vault, it did perfect them. These architectural forms enable Roman architects to build large roof structures without the use of pillars. These forms were also important in their ability to build great bridges and aqueducts, which were critical in the development and expansion of one of the history's greatest empires. And the fourth one is Roman architecture allowed large cities to grow. Roman architecture pioneered extremely advanced architectural concepts that were critical in allowing large cities to grow, allowing the empire to expand across vast distances. For example, the bridges, the sewers, and the roads that were being explained from the presenters before me. And last but not least, concrete was heavily used in Roman architecture. The Romans' discovery of primitive form of concrete enabled these architectural feats. In fact, Roman concrete is very similar to modern Portland cement in that it is made by combining a dry aggregate with a mortar that absorbs water and hardens. This revolutionary material provided Roman architecture with unprecedented form, flexibility, as well as strength and durability. That's all from our presentation. We hope that everyone get the information and the knowledge about the Roman architecture and building. Thank you and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.